The snow fell softly over Wheatsport, New York, in January of 2000. A town where everyone knew everyone, where doors were left unlocked, and secrets were whispered behind cupped hands. On that cold, quiet morning, Michael Wallace, a devoted husband and father, was found dead at just 38 years old. Doctors attributed it to a heart attack, a tragic, yet seemingly natural end. But in the quiet corners of small-town America, not all tragedies are as they seem. Sometimes, behind lace curtains and polite smiles, a darker truth begins to stir. A truth so calculated, so cold, it can shatter a community and expose a predator hiding in plain sight. Before we unravel this complex case, tell us in the comments below, where are you watching from today? Now, let's go back to that silent, snowy morning, when the first whispers of a chilling saga began. The tranquil hush of a fresh snowfall draped over Wheatsport, New York, in the early days of January 2000. It was a picturesque, almost idyllic scene, the kind of small town where the rhythm of life beat with a steady, reassuring predictability. Here, the scent of wood smoke mingled with the crisp winter air, and the gentle murmur of everyday existence rarely betrayed any deep-seated unrest. Familiar faces greeted each other in the aisles of the local grocery store, and the shared history of generations knitted the community into a tight, trusting fabric. This pervasive sense of safety often manifested in unlocked doors and unquestioning neighborly faith. Yet, within this serene tableau, beneath the pristine white blanket of snow, the initial, almost imperceptible strokes of a deeply disturbing narrative were being silently laid down. At the heart of this unfolding story was Stacey Castor, then 32 years old, residing in an unassuming house that blended seamlessly into Wheatsport's suburban sprawl. To most, Stacey was a woman easily overlooked. Her appearance was notably ordinary: an average height, brown hair often pulled back practically, and a preference for simple, functional clothing that made her fade into any background. She was known as a homemaker, a mother dedicated to raising her two daughters, Ashley and Bree. Her smile, though readily offered in social interactions, possessed a peculiar quality. It rarely seemed to fully engage her eyes, hinting at a guardedness, a depth of emotion held in careful reserve that few, if any, ever truly noticed or questioned. It was this very unremarkable quality, this effortless ability to blend into the quiet anonymity of small-town life, that would later be identified as her most insidious weapon. Behind this carefully constructed facade of an average existence, Stacey meticulously cultivated a labyrinth of dark secrets, each more chilling than the last, poised to shatter the very foundations of trust and expose a predator hiding in plain sight. Her first husband, Michael Wallace, presented a stark contrast to Stacey's reserved demeanor. At 38 years old, Michael was everything Stacey appeared not to be: open, affable, and deeply woven into the community's social fabric. He was widely regarded as a dependable, hard-working man, a devoted father who cherished his two girls, and a friendly, approachable figure to his neighbors. His routine was one of steadfast diligence. He rose before dawn each weekday, commuting to his job, and returned home each evening to the comforting warmth of his family. He and Stacey had met young, in 1984, when she was just 17, embarking on a relationship that culminated in their marriage in April 1990. With their eldest daughter, Ashley, then approximately 12 years old, and Bree, a few years younger, the Wallace family epitomized the quintessential American household, navigating the everyday joys, challenges, and quiet rhythms of suburban life. Their existence, from an external perspective, was one of stable normalcy, a foundation upon which a tragic deception would soon be built. However, as the unforgiving grip of winter tightened its hold over Wheatsport in the waning months of 1999 and the early weeks of 2000, an insidious shadow began to fall over Michael Wallace. What initially manifested as a vague, pervasive malaise, a general feeling of being unwell, dismissed as a lingering cold or seasonal fatigue, soon escalated into a disturbing and undeniable array of symptoms. Persistent nausea became a daily torment, leaving him drained, disoriented, and increasingly unable to keep food down. A creeping weakness, unlike any he had experienced before, began to undermine his once robust physique, making even simple tasks arduous. He would often stumble, his gait becoming unsteady and uncertain. A persistent, hacking cough punctuated his days and nights, growing more severe with each passing week. Perhaps most alarming was the noticeable and increasing swelling in his extremities and face, a physical manifestation that became increasingly difficult for his family to ignore. The transformation was stark. Michael, once a man brimming with vibrant energy, was slowly, inexplicably, fading before their eyes. Stacey, throughout this agonizing period, meticulously maintained an impeccable public persona as the worried, utterly devoted wife. She was a constant presence at Michael's side, accompanying him to every doctor's appointment. Her face, to all outward appearances, was etched with a convincing display of deep concern. She engaged medical staff with a barrage of questions, her voice carefully modulated to convey a mixture of anxiety and a desperate search for answers. With an air of diligent responsibility, she meticulously recorded every reported symptom, every medical suggestion, and every doctor's casual observation in a small notebook she seemed to carry everywhere. Her solicitous demeanor was so utterly convincing that medical professionals, faced with Michael's perplexing and worsening condition, struggled to offer a definitive diagnosis. They posited various theories: a particularly virulent, lingering virus, perhaps chronic, unacknowledged stress, or even an unusual, severe allergic reaction. Their recommendations were largely symptomatic: strict bed rest, increased hydration, and a regimen of over-the-counter medications and vitamins. None of these brought Michael any lasting relief, a fact Stacey noted with apparent despair. But Michael Wallace found no solace, no improvement. On the contrary, his mysterious illness steadily, mercilessly worsened. His decline cast a profound pall over the entire holiday season. The usual warmth and festivities of Christmas and New Year's were entirely overshadowed by his ongoing deterioration. The family attempted to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but Michael's increasing frailty made it impossible. His once hearty appetite vanished, replaced by an aversion to food. His daughters, Ashley and Bree, watched their once vibrant father grow increasingly weak and withdrawn, their young hearts heavy with unspoken fear. Family members, both Michael's and Stacey's, witnessed his alarming decline and grew increasingly vocal in their concerns, urging him to seek more specialized medical opinions, to travel to larger hospitals in Syracuse for advanced diagnostics, to press the doctors for more definitive answers. Yet, before any further, more aggressive medical interventions could be arranged, on a quiet, snow-laden January afternoon in 2000, as Weedsport was once again transformed into a silent, picturesque scene of winter beauty, Michael Wallace succumbed to his illness. He was pronounced dead at home. The official cause of death, delivered by medical professionals who had been utterly baffled by his complex and rapidly progressing symptoms, was attributed to a sudden, fatal heart attack. He was only 38 years old, a life cut tragically short. The news, though not entirely unexpected given Michael's recent decline, still reverberated with profound shock through the close-knit Weedsport community. A palpable sense of grief descended upon the Wallace household. Ashley and Bree, reeling from the abruptness of their father's death, openly mourned his loss. Their young lives, already touched by the uncertainty of his illness, were now shattered by a finality they could barely comprehend. Neighbors, adhering to the comforting, time-honored traditions of small-town solace, arrived with homemade casseroles, offering hushed condolences and quiet support. The funeral service, a solemn affair held in the local church, drew a significant turnout, a poignant testament to Michael's standing and popularity within Weedsport. Stacey, dressed impeccably in somber black, played the role of the heartbroken widow to absolute perfection. Her public tears flowed freely, seemingly uncontrollable, and she clung to her daughters, offering and receiving comfort in equal measure as Michael's coffin was slowly, reverently, lowered into the frozen earth. However, amidst this collective outpouring of grief and communal sympathy, a quiet but persistent unease began to stir within Michael's immediate family, particularly his sister, Linda Horzempa. Linda found the circumstances surrounding her brother's death deeply troubling. Michael had been a relatively young man, active and seemingly healthy, with no known history of significant cardiac problems that would suggest such a sudden, fatal event. His rapid, unexplained decline, culminating in a death that lacked a clear, preceding medical explanation, struck her as profoundly suspicious. Driven by a sister's fierce intuition and an unyielding desire for definitive answers, Linda formally requested an autopsy. It was a standard, routine procedure for unexplained deaths, a logical pathway to clarity that could potentially allay all fears. Stacey, however, vehemently opposed the request. Her refusal was firm, unequivocal, and delivered with an air of dignified finality. She presented her rationale with a veneer of pious respect for the deceased, asserting that she trusted the doctor's initial diagnosis, saw no need for further intrusive investigation, and simply wanted to allow Michael to rest in peace without further disturbance to his body. Her arguments, framed within the emotional context of a grieving widow's wishes, proved convincing enough to effectively quell any further immediate questioning from both the extended family and the local law enforcement. Without a direct court order or any clear, overt evidence of foul play at that specific moment, the matter was regrettably left undisputed. Young men, tragically, sometimes did succumb to sudden heart attacks. It was undeniably a sorrowful event, but at that precise juncture, lacking any explicit indicators of criminal activity, it was not deemed suspicious enough to override the wishes of a distraught, yet seemingly composed, widow. With the funeral complete and Michael Wallace laid to rest, Stacey Castor, with a chillingly calculated resolve, began the public process of moving forward. Her performance as the devastated, yet resilient, widow had been flawless, masterfully diverting any nascent suspicions that might have otherwise taken root. The facade of profound grief she wore was so utterly convincing that the lingering questions held by a discerning few were easily dismissed as the natural anxieties and second-guessing inherent in any sudden loss. Yet, this initial tragedy, officially attributed to natural causes, would, in the fullness of time, be meticulously re-examined through a much darker, far more cynical lens. It would become recognized as the first known instance in a chilling and systematic pattern of unexplained deaths that would, with disturbing regularity, accumulate around Stacey Castor. Among these, though not immediately connected or investigated in parallel, was the passing of her own father, Jerry Daniels, who would die just 2 years later, in February 2002. His death, following a seemingly minor pulmonary complaint, added another layer of unsettling questions to Stacey's increasingly complex and troubling narrative. This early event, Michael's death and its immediate aftermath, established the chilling precedent of Stacey Castor's manipulative character and her horrifying ability to orchestrate a crime with lethal precision, disappearing back into the quiet, trusting fabric of a small town, utterly undetected. This was the precise moment the silent whispers in Weedsport truly began to hold weight, though their full, terrifying meaning and the extent of Stacey's ruthlessness would remain elusive, buried beneath layers of deception, for many years to come. The quiet solitude of Weedsport, New York, persisted for 2 years after Michael Wallace's untimely death, a period during which Stacey Castor continued to reside within its unassuming embrace. The public facade of a grieving widow, resiliently picking up the pieces of her shattered life for her 2 daughters, remained intact. She had weathered the initial storm of sympathy and sorrow, and as time moved on, so too did Stacey. In 2001, seeking to redefine her daily routine and perhaps secure a more stable future, Stacey took a position as an office manager at Liverpool Heating and Air Conditioning, a reputable installation and repair company. It was here, amidst the hum of telephones and the organized chaos of a busy small business, that she would encounter her second husband. David Castor Sr. was the owner, a man who, by all accounts, was Michael Wallace's antithesis. Where Michael had been somewhat reserved, content with the familiar rhythms of his life, David was expansive, charismatic, and undeniably ambitious. He was a self-made entrepreneur, divorced, and known for his boisterous laugh that could fill a room, coupled with an infectious confidence that instantly put people at ease. David's dedication to quality in his work was well known, and his personal life was marked by a deep connection to his adult son from his first marriage, David Castor Jr., who would later recall a happy childhood filled with familial closeness. David was drawn to Stacey. She presented herself as a woman still bearing the quiet wounds of loss, a figure seemingly vulnerable and in need of solace and protection. David, with his inherent desire to be a provider and a protector, found himself captivated. He saw in her not a complex, calculating individual, but a woman deserving of happiness after such profound tragedy. Their courtship was brief but intense, fueled by David's buoyant optimism and Stacey's carefully crafted persona of fragility. By 2003, just 3 years after Michael Wallace's death, Stacey and David were married. She adopted his surname, Castor, and would be known by it thereafter. Ashley and Bree gained a stepfather, and the 2 families merged, at least on the surface. David Castor Jr. found himself with a new stepmother and 2 stepsisters. Life, to outward appearances, seemed to be settling back into a comfortable normalcy within the newly formed Castor household. David immersed himself in his business, working long hours, while Stacey managed the office, and the girls continued their schooling. From the quiet perspective of Weedsport, they were merely another American family, bravely rebuilding after unexpected sorrow. But the illusion of normalcy, meticulously constructed by Stacey, was destined to be fleeting. In the summer of 2005, a mere 2 years after their wedding, David Castor Sr. began to exhibit a deeply disturbing array of symptoms, chillingly reminiscent of Michael Wallace's final months. It began subtly, an inexplicable fatigue that steadily eroded his boundless energy. Then came persistent nausea, a creeping mental confusion that blurred his sharp business acumen, and a profound weakness that often left him unsteady, even staggering. David, a man known for his robust health and vibrant presence, found himself struggling to get out of bed in the mornings, his once indomitable spirit slowly being extinguished by an unseen affliction. As David's health deteriorated, Stacey maintained her familiar public display of concern, yet subtly began to weave a narrative designed to deflect future suspicion. She spoke to friends and family about ongoing marital discussions, portraying David's behavior as increasingly erratic and suggesting he was suffering from depression. These conversations, though seemingly casual, served to plant seeds of doubt about David's mental state, creating a context that could later be manipulated. On a Friday evening in August 2005, the fabricated tension escalated. Stacey later claimed that following an intense argument, David had barricaded himself in their bedroom, ordering her to take the children and leave. He had allegedly threatened her, promising she would regret it if she stayed. This dramatic account, delivered with a rehearsed blend of fear and exasperation, set the stage for the unfolding tragedy. Stacey stated that David remained locked in a room throughout the entire weekend, and she, ostensibly fearing for her safety and that of her daughters, did not immediately contact authorities. It was not until Sunday afternoon, after a calculated delay, that Stacey finally placed a frantic call to the Onondaga County Sheriff's Office. Her voice, quavering with what appeared to be genuine distress, relayed her manufactured story. David had been holed up in their bedroom since Friday night after their heated argument, she explained. He hadn't emerged once. She expressed profound fear, mentioning that there was a shotgun kept underneath the bed, fueling her anxieties that he might have harmed himself. The urgency in her voice was convincing enough to dispatch officers immediately. Upon arrival, deputies and Sergeant Michael Norton, one of the first on the scene, were met by a visibly agitated Stacey Castor. She directed them to the locked bedroom door. After attempts to solicit a response from inside proved futile, officers were forced to breach the door. The scene that confronted them was one of profound chaos and despair. David Castor Sr., aged 48, lay dead in his bed. He was naked, his body covered in copious amounts of vomit, which had also drenched the bedsheets and stained the surrounding carpet. The air in the room was heavy with the acrid smell of sickness. On the nightstand, beside the bed, a glass containing a bright, unnaturally green liquid stood starkly against the disarray. Partially hidden beneath the bed, almost as an afterthought, lay a gallon container of antifreeze. Stacey, upon witnessing the grim sight, erupted into a fit of screams, repeatedly exclaiming, "He's not dead. He's not dead." Her performance was a masterful blend of horror and disbelief, designed to solidify the impression of a distraught widow. Sergeant Norton, a seasoned officer accustomed to scenes of tragedy, made an initial assessment. The presence of the green liquid, the antifreeze container, and Stacey's account of David's recent depression and erratic behavior painted a grimly coherent picture. It appeared to be a straightforward case of suicide by antifreeze poisoning, an open-and-shut case, tragic but unambiguous. However, Detective Dominic Spinelli, a veteran investigator with the Onondaga County Police, arrived shortly after and surveyed the scene with a more critical eye. His years of experience had honed an instinct for inconsistencies, for the subtle details that betrayed a deeper truth. Spinelli was not convinced. There were peculiarities that immediately caught his attention, red flags that fluttered in the periphery of the apparent suicide. For instance, while the carpet around the antifreeze gallon was heavily saturated with vomit, the gallon itself was remarkably clean, almost pristine. It seemed incongruous, as if it had been placed there after David had already succumbed to his illness, rather than having been handled by a man in his final, violent throes. Even more perplexing were the fingerprints on the glass, containing the bright green liquid. Forensic analysis quickly revealed that the only discernible fingerprints on the glass belonged solely to Stacey. If David had poured and consumed the liquid himself, why were his prints absent? Furthermore, the positioning of Stacey's prints suggested a deliberate act. They were located on the lower half of the glass, oriented as if someone were holding the cup and raising it to another person's mouth. This detail gnawed at Spinelli, casting a long shadow over the simple suicide narrative. The inconsistencies continued to mount. During a thorough sweep of the Castor residence, investigators made another chilling discovery: a turkey baster, not tucked away in a kitchen drawer, but found in an unexpected location within the house. This peculiar kitchen implement, typically used for basting poultry, bore faint but unmistakable traces of antifreeze. More disturbingly, forensic examination of the baster's tip revealed the presence of David Castor's DNA. The implication was immediate and horrifying. The baster had likely been used to forcibly administer the poisonous liquid to David. The official autopsy results only deepened the growing suspicion. David Castor's body, once vibrant and full of life, was found to be saturated with ethylene glycol, the primary component of antifreeze. This potent, sweet-tasting chemical is a lethal poison that, upon ingestion, systematically attacks the body's vital organs, leading to renal failure, seizures, coma, and eventually death. The medical examiners, meticulously analyzing the evidence, concluded unequivocally that David Castor had not ingested the antifreeze voluntarily. The presence of the poison, coupled with the evidence of forced administration, left no doubt. David Castor had been murdered. The narrative of suicide, once so seemingly clear-cut, crumbled entirely. The investigation pivoted sharply from a tragic self-inflicted death to a cold-blooded homicide. Detective Spinelli, his initial instincts tragically confirmed, now knew he was dealing with a killer. The quiet, ordinary life of Stacey Castor was beginning to unravel, revealing the dark tapestry of deceit woven beneath. The subtle signals of inconsistencies in the death scene had now blossomed into undeniable evidence of murder, setting the stage for an investigation that would expose a killer more ruthless and cunning than anyone in Weedsport could have imagined. The transformation of David Castor Sr.'s death from a suspected suicide to a confirmed homicide sent a cold ripple through the Onondaga County Sheriff's Office. Detective Dominic Spinelli, his veteran instincts now fully engaged, spearheaded the burgeoning investigation. The meticulous forensic findings, the ethylene glycol poisoning, the baster with David's DNA, Stacey's fingerprints on the incriminating glass, had undeniably pointed a finger, not at a victim of self-harm, but at a perpetrator. Stacey Castor, the seemingly distraught widow, was now the prime suspect. The immediate aftermath of David's death was a flurry of activity for law enforcement. While the initial responders had viewed the scene as a tragic, if somewhat messy, suicide, Spinelli's critical eye and a subsequent autopsy had irrevocably altered that perception. The small town of Weedsport, already reeling from the sudden loss of a prominent businessman, was now unknowingly on the precipice of a much darker revelation. The detective, however, was keenly aware that solid evidence and a compelling narrative were needed to dismantle Stacey's carefully constructed image. The funeral for David Castor Sr. was held on August 25, 2005, a somber occasion that drew a considerable crowd of mourners. As the community gathered at Owasco Rural Cemetery, offering their final respects, Detective Spinelli was also present, not as a mourner, but as an observer. His presence was discreet, his gaze analytical, scanning the scene for any further anomaly or any subtle reaction that might offer a clue. It was then, amidst the rows of headstones and the quiet solemnity of the occasion, that an unnerving detail struck him with the force of a premonition. David Castor's freshly dug grave lay immediately adjacent to another tomb, a grave whose inscription bore a familiar name: Michael Wallace. Spinelli's eyes widened almost imperceptibly as he processed the chilling proximity. Two husbands, both dead prematurely, both buried side by side, and both gravestones, in an eerie symmetry, bore Stacey's name, husband of Stacey R., on David's and Michael Wallace's own stone, engraved with Stacey's name and birth date. The sheer coincidence of this arrangement, given the mounting evidence of homicide in David's case, was too stark to ignore. It transcended mere happenstance. It screamed of a pattern, a predatory shadow stretching back into the past. This visual connection in the cemetery cemented a nascent, terrifying thought in Spinelli's mind. Could Michael Wallace's death, once dismissed as a heart attack, be connected to David's murder? The question, once unthinkable, now became an urgent imperative. Spinelli wasted no time. His focus shifted with relentless precision. He immediately moved to obtain Michael Wallace's medical records from January 2000. For 5 years, Michael's death had been accepted as a tragic natural occurrence. But now, with the chilling parallel of David's poisoning, every detail of Michael's final illness was scrutinized with fresh, suspicious eyes. The records, when finally reviewed, revealed another jarring inconsistency. For a man who had purportedly died of sudden heart attack, Michael Wallace's medical history presented no evidence of underlying cardiac disease. His heart had been, by all available accounts, perfectly normal. There were no significant risk factors, no prior warnings, nothing to suggest a man of 38 with a healthy heart would simply drop dead. The official cause of death now seemed deeply, profoundly suspect. The question lingered, a dark whisper in the detective's mind. If David had been poisoned, and Stacey was involved, what then of Michael? Michael Wallace had died a heart attack, the doctors had declared in 2000. But no complete autopsy had been performed. No one had looked for poison. There had been no reason to suspect foul play then. But now, the reasons were overwhelming. Armed with the mounting evidence from David Castor's case and the unsettling anomalies in Michael Wallace's medical history, Spinelli pursued a bold and unprecedented course of action. He obtained a court order for the exhumation of Michael Wallace's body. 7 long years after his burial, in September 2007, the coffin of Michael Wallace was disinterred from the quiet earth of Owasco Rural Cemetery. It was a macabre undertaking, a somber scene witnessed by a handful of investigators and medical personnel under a shroud of official secrecy. His body, remarkably preserved by the cold, damp soil, still held secrets that the living had overlooked. The remains were transported to the medical examiner's office for a full toxicological analysis. The results, when they came, were unequivocal and devastating. Toxicologists found precisely what Detective Spinelli had begun to fear. Michael Wallace's tissues were riddled with microscopic crystals, the undeniable signature of ethylene glycol poisoning. Michael Wallace had not died of a heart attack. He had been poisoned with antifreeze, in precisely the same agonizing manner as David Castor. The call came to Sergeant Michael Norton, who had been heavily involved in the Castor investigation. "Guess what I found?" the medical examiner's voice reportedly stated. "He's full of crystals." In that chilling moment, a horrific truth solidified for Spinelli and Norton. They were not dealing with a single, isolated murder, but a double homicide. And the woman at the center of both deaths was Stacey Castor. The Black Widow of New York, as she would later be dubbed, had claimed 2 victims, seemingly without a trace. With this explosive revelation, the investigation against Stacey Castor intensified dramatically. The net began to tighten. Investigators obtained warrants to tap Stacey's phone lines, monitoring her calls for any incriminating conversations, any slip of the tongue. Surveillance cameras were discreetly installed outside her home, silently documenting her movements, tracking her routine, observing who came and went. The objective was clear: gather irrefutable evidence, build an airtight case, and understand the full scope of her activities now that her deadly pattern had been exposed. The next critical step was to bring Stacey Castor in for formal questioning. The detectives wanted to assess her under pressure, to probe her carefully constructed narrative, to see if she would make a mistake, an unforced error that could shatter her composure. On a date shortly after the exhumation results were confirmed, Stacey Castor was brought to the Onondaga County Sheriff's Department for an interview. The interrogation room was stark, sterile, designed to disorient and provoke honesty. Sitting across from her were the formidable figures of Detective Dominic Spinelli and Detective Valerie Brogan, a sharp, methodical investigator who had joined the team. The interview stretched for 3 grueling hours. Stacey, composed and seemingly unflappable, adamantly denied any involvement in either Michael or David's deaths. She maintained her innocence with a practiced ease, steadfastly clinging to her narrative of a grieving widow and a supportive stepmother. She calmly recounted her version of events surrounding David's alleged suicide, sticking to the story of his depression, their arguments, and his self-imposed isolation. She portrayed herself as a victim of circumstance, caught in a series of unfortunate tragedies. Her answers were precise, her demeanor controlled. The detectives, however, were relentless. They began to dismantle her story, piece by piece, starting with the inconsistencies found at David's death scene. They pressed her on the 2 cups found on David's nightstand, questioning why only her fingerprints were on the glass containing the green liquid. They brought up the phone calls Stacey claimed to have made repeatedly to her home on the day David supposedly committed suicide, only to reveal that phone records showed she had called only once. Each question was designed to chip away at her defenses, to expose the cracks in her narrative. Stacey, despite the mounting pressure, remained largely impassive, deflecting each probe with practiced ease, her eyes betraying little emotion. She accused the detectives of trying to confuse her, to twist her words. "You're trying to trip me up," she retorted, a hint of frustration finally breaking through her composure. Then came the moment. Detective Spinelli, in a move of calculated interrogation, posed a seemingly innocuous question. He referenced the 2 glasses found on David's nightstand. "Of the 2 cups on David's nightstand," he asked, his voice even, "which one had you served cranberry juice in?" The question was designed to elicit a spontaneous, unthinking response, to catch her off guard. Stacey hesitated for a fraction of a second, her gaze flickering. She began to answer, her words flowing smoothly, almost reflexively. "Well," she started, "when I served the antifreeze, I mean cranberry juice." The air in the interrogation room solidified into a thick, palpable silence. The word hung there, stark and revealing. Antifreeze, not antifreeze. Not the full, correct term. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible slip, a Freudian error that spoke volumes. It was not a common mispronunciation, not a simple stutter. It was her private, idiosyncratic way of referring to the lethal substance. Stacey's composure shattered. Her eyes widened, a flicker of panic finally registering. She instantly recognized her catastrophic mistake, the fatal slip of the tongue that had unveiled her deepest secret. She tried to recover, to backtrack, to explain it away. She accused the detectives, her voice rising now, of deliberately trying to frame her, to confuse her into saying something incriminating. "You tricked me. You confused me," she exclaimed, her previous calm dissolving into a frantic defense. And then, abruptly, decisively, she brought the interview to an immediate halt. "That's it. I want a lawyer." But the word had been spoken. Antifreeze. 2 syllables, casually uttered, yet profoundly incriminating. It was a linguistic fingerprint, a verbal signature that resonated with deadly clarity in the minds of the detectives. It was a seemingly small error, a momentary lapse, but it would return to haunt Stacey Castor, becoming a critical piece of evidence that helped to seal her fate and, ultimately, exposing the chilling depths of her depravity. The game, for Stacey Castor, had irrevocably changed. The cold, damning truth of the exhumation, confirming Michael Wallace's antifreeze poisoning, coupled with the meticulous forensic evidence from David Castor Sr.'s murder, had placed Stacey Castor squarely in the crosshairs of Detectives Dominic Spinelli and Sergeant Michael Norton. Her flimsy denials during interrogation, culminating in the telling antifreeze slip, had merely deepened the investigators' resolve. Phone taps were now a constant, insidious presence in her life, silently recording her every conversation. Discreet surveillance cameras, strategically placed around her home, captured her movements, creating a chronological log of her activities. Stacey, a woman who had twice escaped detection for murder, now felt the tightening vice of the law. The freedom she had so cruelly exploited for financial gain and ruthless self-preservation was rapidly diminishing. In this moment of acute desperation, with her carefully constructed world crumbling around her, Stacey Castor conceived of a plan that defied the most fundamental human instincts: to sacrifice her own child. Her target was Ashley Wallace, her eldest daughter, then 20 years old. Stacey, utterly devoid of genuine empathy, recalled a conversation with Ashley, one born of a daughter's fierce loyalty and profound grief. When investigators had first approached Ashley, cautiously hinting at the possibility of foul play in Michael Wallace's death, a shocked and emotionally distraught Ashley, in a moment of raw anguish and filial devotion, had declared that she would even take the blame herself if it meant protecting her mother. Stacey, a predator constantly scanning for weaknesses and opportunities, had filed that desperate, loving declaration away. Now, with the walls of justice closing in, that vulnerable statement would become the chilling cornerstone of her monstrous alibi. The stage for this unspeakable betrayal was meticulously set on the evening of September 13, 2007. Stacey approached Ashley with an offer that, to a 20-year-old on the cusp of legal adulthood, likely seemed like a rare, heartwarming gesture of mother-daughter camaraderie. Ashley's 21st birthday was approaching, a significant milestone, often marked by celebration. Stacey, with a disarming warmth and feigned affection she rarely truly displayed, suggested they have an early birthday celebration, just the 2 of them. "We've had a tough week," Stacey reportedly told her eldest daughter, her voice soft, empathetic, masking the icy intent beneath. "Let's just get drunk." For Ashley, still grappling with the lingering pain of her biological father's unexpected death and the recent tumultuous revelation about her stepfather, David Castor Sr. The idea of a carefree evening with her mother, indulging in drinks with explicit parental permission, likely felt like an unexpected gift. It promised a fleeting return to a sense of normalcy, a reconnection with the only parent she had left. Of course, Ashley, unsuspecting and trusting, readily accepted. Stacey, with practiced, chilling precision, prepared the drinks. For Ashley, it was a vodka cocktail, poured into an ordinary glass, appearing entirely innocent. But what Ashley couldn't possibly fathom, was that her mother had meticulously loaded the beverage with a lethal concoction. It wasn't just vodka, it was a potent, deadly brew. Stacey had crushed a powerful cocktail of sedatives, strong sleeping pills, and heavy-duty painkillers, dissolving them carefully to mask their telltale bitterness and expedite their incapacitating effects. Ashley, trusting her mother implicitly, took the first sip, then drank the glass down. She recalled later that the taste was horrible, an acrid bitterness underlying the alcohol. But in her innocent ignorance, she chalked it up to an inexperienced mixologist mother or perhaps an unusual, cheap brand of vodka. Soon after consuming the drink, the potent drugs began their insidious work. Ashley felt an overwhelming wave of nausea, followed by disorienting dizziness, washing over her. The room began to spin violently. She barely managed to stumble towards her bedroom, the world blurring around her, before collapsing onto her bed, rapidly succumbing to the powerful sedatives. The next morning, September 14th, Ashley, still deep in a drug-induced haze, groggy and disoriented, was offered another drink by her mother. Again, the taste was horrible, she would later recount, even more so than the night before, but in her heavily compromised, semi-conscious state, she swallowed it down without protest. The additional, immense dose served only to deepen her stupor, pushing her further into a profound coma. She drifted back into the blackness of unconsciousness, completely unaware of the insidious horror unfolding around her, the cold, calculating machinations of her own mother. What transpired next was a chilling testament to Stacey Castor's calculated cruelty and her utter disregard for human life, even that of her own child. Over the next 17 harrowing hours, a period of agonizing, slow decline, as Ashley lay completely unconscious, slowly succumbing to the overwhelming cocktail of drugs, Stacey embarked on the final, most depraved phase of her plan. She obtained a teaspoon, a seemingly innocuous kitchen utensil, and methodically, relentlessly, continued to force more vodka and additional crushed pills into her daughter's unresponsive mouth. This was not a quick, single act of poisoning. It was a prolonged, methodical act of torture, a systematic administration of what prosecutors would later describe as a cornucopia of drugs, a truly fatal dose, carefully titrated over hours, designed to ensure Ashley's quiet, irreversible death. Stacey watched, cold, unfeeling, and utterly detached, as her own flesh and blood slowly, painfully slipped towards oblivion. She exhibited no remorse, no flicker of maternal instinct, only a single-minded determination to see her heinous plan through. While Ashley was agonizingly dying in her bedroom, Stacey moved with chilling purpose to the family computer, positioned in a common area of the house. She opened Microsoft Word, her fingers poised over the keyboard, and began to type with deliberate speed. Her goal was to craft a confession, a suicide note that would not only provide a plausible explanation for Ashley's impending death, but, more critically, would unequivocally absolve Stacey of all responsibility for the preceding murders of both Michael Wallace and David Castor Sr. The letter, a verbose and meticulously crafted document spanning 750 words, was a detailed, chillingly convincing narrative. In it, Ashley supposedly admitted to the killings of her biological father, Michael, and her stepfather, David. The fabricated motive was a tormented conscience, an inability to live with the immense guilt of her heinous actions. Crucially, the manufactured confession repeatedly and obsessively emphasized, 14 distinct times within the letter's lengthy text, that her mother, Stacey, had absolutely no involvement in either murder, stating unequivocally that she was entirely innocent. It was a masterpiece of deceptive rhetoric, carefully designed to paint Ashley as the sole, tormented culprit, haunted by her imaginary crimes, and Stacey as the ultimate, innocent victim, tragically losing 2 husbands, and then her beloved, troubled daughter. The morning of September 14, 2007, dawned with a heavy, foreboding silence, a silence that held the lingering scent of death. It was Bree Wallace, Ashley's younger sister, then in her mid-teens, who made the horrifying discovery. Bree entered Ashley's bedroom, expecting to find her sister merely sleeping in, perhaps nursing a hangover. Instead, she found Ashley lying motionless in bed, barely breathing, her skin unnaturally pale and disturbingly cold to the touch. The sight instantly triggered a wave of raw terror. Bree's scream, a primal sound of shock and fear, pierced the heavy silence of the house, immediately alerting Stacey. Bree, frantic and clear-headed despite the horror, demanded that an ambulance be called immediately. Stacey did place the call to 911. However, what profoundly struck investigators later, upon meticulously reviewing the chilling recording, was Stacey's peculiar and disturbing focus during the call. While reporting her daughter's dire, unresponsive condition, her voice carrying a feigned note of hysteria, she seemed far more intent on relaying the existence and content of the suicide note than on providing precise, detailed information about Ashley's critical medical state. She really wanted the 911 operator to know there was a suicide note. Assistant District Attorney Christine Garvey would later observe, highlighting the chilling priority Stacey placed on solidifying her fabricated alibi over the actual, imminent death of her own child. It was a cold, calculated performance, even in a moment of supposed crisis. As paramedics rushed into the Castor house, responding to the urgent 911 call, Stacey, with a carefully timed, theatrical gesture, swiftly retrieved the lengthy, handwritten letter she had deliberately placed beside Ashley. She handed it to the bewildered paramedics, emphasizing its importance as a suicide note. Ashley was immediately rushed to the nearest hospital, her life hanging by the thinnest of threads. Doctors, faced with a young woman on the absolute brink of death from a massive, complex drug overdose, fought desperately, heroically, to save her life. They performed emergency gastric lavage, administered potent doses of activated charcoal, and monitored her rapidly failing vital functions minute by agonizing minute. The situation was dire, the prognosis grim. District Attorney William Fitzpatrick would later state, with chilling certainty, that Ashley was a mere 15 minutes away from irreversible death when she finally arrived at the emergency room. 15 minutes. Such was the razor-thin margin between survival and a meticulously planned, successful murder disguised as a tragic suicide. But miraculously, against all rational expectations, after days spent in a profound, drug-induced coma, Ashley Wallace survived. She slowly awoke in a sterile hospital bed, disoriented and weak, surrounded by the gentle hum of medical equipment and the watchful, serious eyes of doctors, nurses, and, crucially, detectives. When they carefully presented her with a suicide note, a document that purportedly contained her confession to the murders of her biological father and stepfather, Ashley looked at them with wide, confused eyes. Her response was immediate, clear, unequivocal, and utterly devastating for Stacey Castor. "I did not try to kill myself, nor did I leave a suicide note," Ashley stated, her voice weak but surprisingly firm, cutting through the confusion of her drug state. "I did not kill my father. I did not kill my stepfather. You need to talk to my mother for answers." Ashley had no recollection whatsoever of writing any letter. She had no memory of willingly taking pills or attempting to end her own life. The last coherent memory she held was of drinking vodka with her mother, those horrible-tasting drinks her mother had so generously prepared for their celebration. Her words, though spoken from a hospital bed of recovery, resonated with the profound force of a direct accusation, dismantling Stacey's entire, carefully constructed edifice of lies and shifting the focus of the investigation back to its rightful subject. The monstrous plot to sacrifice her own daughter had not only failed spectacularly, but had now transformed Ashley into the most damning, most powerful witness against her, a living testament to her mother's unimaginable depravity. Ashley Wallace's miraculous survival and her firm denial from her hospital bed shattered Stacey Castor's elaborate alibi. The fabricated suicide note, which Stacey had so eagerly presented, became the focus of intense forensic examination. The investigators, now fully understanding the depth of Stacey's depravity, knew the battle was far from over. Detectives meticulously analyzed the 750-word letter. They found it contained a critical error. The word antifreeze was consistently misspelled 4 times as antifree. This unique misspelling perfectly matched Stacey Castor's verbal slip during her interrogation, the very error that had caused her to abruptly end the interview. This linguistic fingerprint was irrefutable proof of her authorship, an indelible mark connecting her directly to the deceit. Forensic computer specialists further solidified the case against Stacey. Their examination of the Castor family's computer revealed that the suicide note had been typed in Microsoft Word. Crucially, timestamp data proved the letter was drafted and revised while Ashley Wallace was at school, making it impossible for Ashley to have written it. The analysis also confirmed Stacey had created two separate drafts, demonstrating chilling premeditation in her plot to frame her daughter. With this overwhelming evidence, Ashley's testimony, the exhumation results confirming Michael Wallace's antifreeze poisoning, the physical evidence from David Castor Sr.'s murder, and the conclusive computer and linguistic forensic analysis, Stacey Castor's intricate web of lies unraveled completely. On September 14, 2007, the same day Ashley miraculously regained consciousness, Stacey Castor was arrested. She was charged with second-degree murder for David Castor's death, attempted second-degree murder of Ashley Wallace, and forgery related to David Castor's will. Stacey, who had previously only faced a traffic ticket, now confronted charges that promised to imprison her for life. The trial of Stacey Castor began in January 2009 in a packed Onondaga County courtroom. District Attorney William Fitzpatrick led a devastating prosecution, systematically dismantling Stacey's facade. The state presented a chilling narrative supported by irrefutable evidence. The autopsy reports detailing ethylene glycol poisoning in both Michael Wallace and David Castor. The turkey baster found near David's body, containing his DNA and antifreeze residue, Stacey's fingerprints on the incriminating glass, and the unequivocal computer forensics proving Stacey authored the fake suicide note while Ashley was at school. The note's insistent 14 declarations of Stacey's innocence further highlighted its manipulative purpose. The prosecution also demonstrated Stacey's financial motive, presenting evidence that she had forged David Castor's will, diverting his entire estate to herself and her daughters, and disinheriting David Castor Jr. Lynn and Paul Pulaski, friends of Stacey, testified under immunity, detailing how Stacey coerced them into falsely witnessing the forged document. The antifreeze misspelling was presented as a critical piece of evidence, linking Stacey directly to the letter's creation and exposing her attempt to frame Ashley. The most impactful testimony came from Ashley Wallace herself. Tearful yet resolute, she confronted her mother from the witness stand, recounting the horror of being drugged and nearly killed by the person she trusted most. "I would have done anything for her," Ashley stated, her voice breaking, "but she tried to kill me." Forensic psychiatrist Dr. James Knoll testified that Stacey exhibited classic psychopathic traits, viewing people as tools rather than individuals, and highlighting the Black Widow pattern of women who kill their partners. He noted that such individuals often lack empathy and are prone to reoffending. This context implicitly acknowledged suspicions regarding Stacey's father, Jerry Daniels' death. Defense attorney Charles Keller attempted a desperate strategy, try and pin the murders on Ashley. He argued that a 12-year-old Ashley had killed Michael due to abuse and jealousy, and later David out of hatred, then attempted suicide out of guilt. This narrative, however, was easily debunked by the scientific evidence, especially the computer forensics proving Stacey, not Ashley, authored the suicide note. The jury saw through the desperate deflection. The trial revealed the agonizing nature of Stacey's crimes. She had systematically poisoned both husbands with antifreeze, watching them suffer for weeks. Ethylene glycol poisoning is a slow, brutal process involving nausea, confusion, organ failure, seizures, and coma, a protracted torture Stacey inflicted twice. After 16 hours of deliberation over 4 days, the jury returned its verdict on February 5, 2009, guilty. Stacey Castor was convicted of second-degree murder for David Castor's death, attempted second-degree murder of Ashley Wallace, and forgery. Stacey remained impassive. Ashley, overcome with emotion, wept. On March 5, 2009, Judge Joseph Fahey delivered a scathing sentence. "Ms. Castor, you are in a class all by yourself," he declared, condemning her unprecedented willingness to sacrifice her own child. Stacey, then 41, received 51 years and 4 months to life in prison, an effective life sentence. David Castor Jr. and Ashley Wallace delivered powerful victim impact statements, expressing their profound pain and calling Stacey a monster. Assistant DA Christine Garvey criticized Stacey's coldness, asserting she valued no human life, not even her own children. Though never charged for Michael Wallace's death due to her existing life sentence, everyone involved in the case understood the full scope of her crimes. Stacey Castor, however, maintained her innocence, appealing her conviction for years. "I would die for my children," she told 2020's, echoing the deny, deny, deny mantra of psychopaths. Stacey spent 7 years at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. On June 11, 2016, at age 48. She was found dead in her cell. The cause was later determined to be a heart attack, with no foul play. District Attorney Fitzpatrick informed Ashley Wallace, then 33, who expressed relief that her mother could no longer harm anyone, yet acknowledged the complex emotions of losing her mother. Stacey's mother, Judy Eaton, continued to believe in her daughter's innocence. The case of Stacey Castor became infamous, featured in numerous true crime documentaries and dramatizations. It underscored how evil can hide behind an ordinary facade, driven by greed and a chilling lack of conscience. Her attempt to murder and frame Ashley, and her 2 previous antifreeze poisonings, painted a portrait of a ruthless Black Widow. Ultimately, it was not merely the meticulous police work or forensic science that brought Stacey Castor down, but her own errors. The clean antifreeze gallon, the turkey baster, the computer timestamps, and critically, that single, repeated misspelling, antifreeze. A small, almost imperceptible mistake, yet it became the linchpin, exposing the calculating and cruel Black Widow of New York. It brought justice for 2 men, saved the reputation of an innocent daughter, and served as a stark reminder that even the most cunning predators can be undone by their own hubris and a simple, revealing typo. The final, chilling echoes of Stacey Castor's reign of terror have long settled over Wheatsport, New York. Her audacious scheme, conceived in desperation and executed with horrifying cruelty, ultimately crumbled not under the weight of a grand gesture, but beneath the meticulous scrutiny of dedicated investigators and the sheer force of truth. A simple misspelling, a fleeting verbal slip, became the indelible mark of her monstrous deception, a testament to the fact that even the most calculating evil can be undone by its own hubris. Though she maintained her false innocence to her last breath, the verdict of the court, and the agonizing truth told by her own daughter, painted a portrait of a woman who viewed human life as utterly disposable. Her death in prison, a heart attack, brought a quiet end to a life marked by unimaginable betrayal, a tragic irony given the slow, torturous deaths she inflicted upon others. This story compels us to look beyond the surface, to question the quiet smiles and ordinary facades. It reminds us that malevolence can wear the most unassuming mask, lurking in the shadows of our most trusted relationships, driven by a cold ambition that knows no bounds. The true horror lies not in the monstrous appearance, but in the monstrous absence of humanity. What resonates with you most from this case? And what do you believe was Stacey Castor's ultimate motivation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Until then, remember to like this video, subscribe to After the Silence for more true crime stories, and join our community as we continue to unravel the darkness hidden in plain sight.